Make no mistake about it, I am absolutely interested in these black flying creatures, these black flying entities that are seen periodically on camera, whether it's these random news stations that are capturing them on camera or people in the public. They seem to have some kind of trend where they are spotted after some kind of big event. Now, of course, you're going to have those people that will say that these are birds, these are bats. You even have some people saying these are bugs. But to me, the way they move is rather unique. It's like they're slithering, like some kind of snake, like some kind of sky snake. You may be saying a sky snake, that's absolutely crazy, but you have to remember that many cultures around the world even worshipped a winged serpent. Now, I'm not saying that these are actual snakes with wings in the sky. All I'm saying is that they have a very unique movement which separates them from birds and bats. And I can't help but think of NASA and Cern when trying to connect the dots here back to these black flying creatures. And I know I said in my previous video how there's this Iranian cleric that had said Israel is using genies, jinn, and demons to take care of their enemies. And this was said only one day before those missile strikes in Israel. But the thing is, these entities are seen all over the world. They're not just seen in Israel. They're also seen in the United States. One was also seen in Turkey. What was interesting about the one in Turkey is that one was seen directly after, or I think a few months after, their massive earthquake. And then we have one that was seen, one was seen in Israel as well, the day or the day after the missile strikes. So these are seen all over the world. Maybe Israel does indeed have knowledge as to what these creatures are, but I wouldn't say it's just Israel. But many other world leaders, the powers that be in general around the world, have knowledge as to what these creatures are. And if these creatures are something normal, then I'm sure they have knowledge that something else does indeed exist. But I don't think they're normal. I don't think they're normal one bit. It's not a coincidence that they keep appearing every time there's a big event. One appeared during the solar eclipse, the April 8th solar eclipse. Then we had one appear in Texas during those very strange tornadoes, those cluster of tornadoes that people kept talking about. And then we had one appear after those earthquakes in Turkey. And then we had one appear after the missile strikes in Israel. So this can't be a coincidence. Like I said in that previous video, they work like some kind of reverse Mothman. They are not harbingers of doom, but they appear after, like I said, some kind of big event. And it doesn't have to be a disaster, but any place where, and somebody made a good point, they seem to appear in any place where there's a lot of fear. And I know there was not a disaster during the solar eclipse, but there was a lot of fear spread when it came to the solar eclipse. For whatever reason, I found that to be very bizarre. Many of us YouTubers, including myself, fell into this trap where we're talking about something big is going to happen during the solar eclipse, and I still think it did, but in a more ritualistic, occultic way. But again, many of us YouTubers and those on social media fell into this trap because we had news agencies telling us, and news is just nothing more than a mouthpiece for the powers that be, but we had all these news agencies telling us to stock up, to prepare, to make sure we have our medication. We may see power outages, blackouts. They even said that the National Guard was going to be in certain locations during the solar eclipse, and we did not see the National Guard once. Then we even had a news agency say how there was going to be an earthquake during the solar eclipse. And again, this was all to build up fear for April 8th.
The strongest earthquake in 140 years, John.
Look at all of that. And it's not over yet because we've got the eclipse earthquake coming up on Monday. As Deborah Ross was telling us, it's going to be a transformative experience for anybody who is in the area of totality.
Anybody that was talking about April 8th in any sort of way, in any negative way, and like I said, I was talking about it, but more in a ritualistic, occultic way, were now seen as fools. We're being blasted in the comment sections of their videos because apparently people thought that the world was going to end on April 8th, when many people did not say that. We're only talking about how the news was mentioning these things that were going to go down, and so we all thought that something was going to happen on April 8th. But again, it was to generate fear, to build up fear. So even though a major disaster did not occur on April 8th, there was still a lot of fear generated around the solar eclipse. And it seems like, again, these black flying creatures generate all fear. But that's just me spitballing. That's just me connecting the dots. And like I said, I connect those dots right back to Cern, right back to NASA. It's also not a coincidence that on April 8th, NASA had a project called APEP or Apophis. And Apophis is essentially just that, the flying serpent, the demon. Basically Satan in ancient Egypt. They fired off 3 of those rockets, and what was captured in May, a month after the solar eclipse, a month after NASA fired all 3 rockets. Well, what was captured in Iraq was 3 of these black flying serpents, or these black flying creatures. I'm sorry if I keep calling them serpents, but 3 of these black flying creatures were seen flying at very high speeds in the sky. The only reason why I'm correcting myself in calling them serpents is because, again, I don't know 100% what they are. I'm only basing it off their movement. You think NASA is all about space and exploring space and so forth. It's all BS. They are nothing more than ritualists, occultists like those at Cern. This is why NASA took over from Jack Parsons, not because of jet propulsion technology, but because Jack Parsons was deep into the occult. He was the student of Aleister Crowley. Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, Walt Disney, among others, they would wander into deserts in New Mexico and practice what is known as Babylon workings, which was passed down from Aleister Crowley. And they said they would summon over these entities. A little bit after they would practice these magics, there was an explosion of UFO sightings seen in the United States. 1 year after these entities were being summoned over here in 1946 New Mexico, we have the Roswell crash. And then we have the CIA having a keen interest in UFOs in 1947. Yes, I'm talking about UFOs being summoned over here, and you might be saying, why would anybody need a UFO to come over to this dimension? It's just machinery. But at the end of the day, we really don't know what they are. We do not know what these flying objects are. It was always my theory that these flying objects, if they're not man-made, then these flying objects come from another dimension, or they come from the waters below. These flying objects, which we think are machinery, might be a life apparatus for something to cross over here. They could be an entity themselves. We, again, don't know 100%. But it's awfully interesting. A year after these rituals were taking place in New Mexico, we get an explosion of UFO sightings, and the government supposedly having a keen interest, like I said, in UFOs. Aleister Crowley's demon lamb, which he summoned over here, looks awfully similar to what we know as a gray alien. What is also rather interesting about Aleister Crowley, and we're talking about Jack Parsons and NASA, but what's interesting about Aleister Crowley, on April 8th, I believe it was 1906 or 1908, on April 8th, the veil was so thin, he actually spoke to a demon, which gave him knowledge to write a book. This entity he called Awas, which he said is his guardian, which helped him write the Book of Law. Then April 8th, 2024, we see this black flying entity flying in the skies. And I even made a video where I said they are summoning over a demon on April 8th, the solar eclipse, because that day was nothing more than a ritual. Now, and I even said this before the April 8th solar eclipse, because these dots are so easy to connect. So yeah, it's very odd that NASA has codenamed serpents on the exact day that one of these were seen flying in Texas. And then we had Cern. Cern initially was going to run the Large Hadron Collider on April 8th. Then some people came out and they said it's kind of suspicious that Cern is running the Large Hadron Collider on the exact same day of the solar eclipse. And then a week later they come out and say, well, everything is ahead of schedule, so we're actually going to go ahead and run the Large Hadron Collider on April 5th. But again, these are liars. I am sure they started up the Large Hadron Collider exactly on April 8th, the same day of the solar eclipse, because their goal was to find dark matter. So Cern is out here looking for dark matter supposedly on the day of the solar eclipse, and we have this dark creature flying in the skies at very high speed. Let us also not forget articles were coming out where CERN themselves were saying that something had escaped from a higher dimension, and they were calling this something a ghost or a specter, but they were also using the word particle to make it sound more like science, a ghost particle, a neutrino. And what's also rather interesting, after these articles were coming out where they were trying to capture this fourth dimensional particle countries around the world were taking more of an interest in neutrinos. Matter of fact, in the United States, they are spending close to $5 billion to build a neutrino facility, which they call Project Doom, the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment. And they actually call it the telephone, because they said themselves they want to hear how the universe began. And it sounds like to me a very expensive Ouija board. So if anybody has any knowledge of these flying creatures, these flying entities, it would definitely be Cern or NASA. And I also find it funny that on the day of the solar eclipse, April 8th, and I know I keep talking about the solar eclipse, but that was really one of the first times we saw this flying creature on camera. And I mean, as the solar eclipse was occurring, people captured this flying. The man that is named after the God particle that Cern was looking for, the reason mainly why the Large Hadron Collider was activated, just happened to pass away on that exact same day, which I believe Cern initiated the Large Hadron Collider during the solar eclipse. Now you may be saying he's old, that's what old people do, they get sick and they pass away. But again, what are the odds that the man named after the God particle, the Higgs boson particle, Peter Higgs, happens to pass away on the same day of the solar eclipse, which Cern goes ahead and activates on the same day that they are looking for this dark matter. What also happens to be interesting is that a day after Cern initiated the Large Hadron Collider, a day after this thing was seen flying in the sky, on April 9th, we see the anomaly for the first time on Beauvais Island. So we have a lot of interesting coincidences here, right? If these are only coincidences, we have a lot of coincidences here. That's the funny part here. People will see these string of coincidences, these many coincidences taking place at one time, and they'll call us fools for even talking about it. Everything's fine. Everything's normal. Now, I am a firm believer that these ritualists at Cern, NASA, and so forth can bring these things over here because they've done so in the past. They've used dark ritualistic sex magics and sacrifices. But now they are intertwining these dark magics, these dark ritualistic magics, with technology to either allow these things over here permanently or allow much more powerful entities over here. Now, it's not just Cern. It's also things like Fermilab here in the United States as well. Because Fermilab came out and said they found the demon. They were thrilled. They were excited to have found the demon. Which, again, like Cern, they used the word particle to make it sound more like science. And they said they found the demon particle 66 years after it was theorized. And I guess that's a coincidence as well. Now, and I guess it's only just a coincidence that the very infamous Illuminati card game, which we keep featuring here on this channel, because again, it keeps foretelling events, even though this is not predictions, this is not prophecy. They are letting us know what's about to take place ahead of time with this card game, like they do so in any other form of media. But one of the cards just happens to be Plague of Demons, where on the card they show us these black things flying in the sky. And the description happens to be even more interesting. It says, disaster. This is an instant attack to destroy any place except a huge one. You must spend an action from a magic group. Who are these magic groups? None other than Cern, NASA, and so forth. So again, it's a very interesting connection. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, as any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.